What's going on, Workforce? Brian and Chris here, and today we're actually talking about side progression as it relates to Deep Dungeon and the limited job systems in Final Fantasy XIV, and what we hope to hear from with Live Letter 66, which is going on tonight. Guys, top link in the description if you want to watch on YouTube, or other link in the description if you want to watch on Twitch. I was like, the second link. That way you can come join us and we can have a good time reacting to the endwalker battle and who knows what else reveal. This topic is specifically going to be focusing in on the Deep Dungeon, what we hope to see for endwalker, and a limited job system, what we hope to see for endwalker, and will we learn some information about it. So Chris, what are the odds that we're going to hear either about Deep Dungeon or limited jobs at tonight's live letter?
So as of now, neither of these pieces of content have even been confirmed for endwalker. So just in general, there has been no confirmation that there would be another limited job mentioned for, during, or even talked about in the future, mentioned during the course of endwalker over the announcements as we look towards 7.0.
Yeah.
There has been no confirmation of that. Deep Dungeon has been mentioned in the context of two things. First of all, they are sorry that they did not put one in Shadowbringers. They tried taking all of the parts that they thought people liked about it. And of course, Palace of the Dead Heaven on High still being available, still being run.
Yeah.
But then also people liked using it for leveling. They gave us an alternative form of leveling. People liked challenging solo duties. They gave us solo dual duties tied to the Bozja Zadnor stuff. Mm-hmm. They gave us the mixed components. They just put them other places because they thought that would be good. And they underestimated the feedback. And as a response, they said they would like to see if there is a way to get one into Endwalker. That is not the same. They also, in the context of the Mythic Plus Savage Dungeon hard 4-man context, that question has been asked multiple times over the years by multiple people, ourselves included, direct to Yoshi P. It's been responded to multiple different ways, all kind of giving like a big full-featured cloud. But TLDR, they don't like putting that much pressure on individual people. They instead really love the bigger stuff. They're loving the way Baldesian Arsenal, Deliberum, and all that have been received. So they like the bigger stuff as an emphasis, but they understand people want the smaller stuff. If they were to ever put emphasis on small man hard PvE content, the light party and smaller, where they think something might be capable of handling like that well, is something like a deep dungeon system. Which is just a super vague of like, if we do a deep dungeon, maybe it has a savage mode or a modified mode or something, or an unreal mode or something tied to it. But that's like, first of all, we don't know if we're getting a deep dungeon. Second of all, we don't know if that deep dungeon would have a hard mode tied to it. It's all just really, really loose. So are we going to hear about it on Friday tonight? I would love to see the Deep Dungeon mentioned. I think that's mid-cycle content, in my opinion. I think that's 6.3.
If it's coming back, 6.3 would still be the time.
That's a year out.
Yeah.
So it's a little soon. So I would like to see it mentioned as a slide. Yeah. Just to confirm we're getting one, and then probably nothing beyond that.
Right. Like, in the past, I think that makes perfect sense. I would hope that we get some news about it in that regards, like some item bullet point on a slide, like as they start to talk about like, okay, after Endwalker, which might be more or less a November update, as they get ready. Hey, Endwalker's launching, and then, okay, obviously soon after Endwalker, 6.1, but I would love to see that brought back. Now, when we talk about like Deep Dungeon, it's so cool that you reference all the things that they took the systems and kind of brought them into Zadnor, right? I think Zadnor, Bozja were this evolution of Eureka and that kind of system that I really connected with, where Eureka I've struggled with, and I've actually been currently leveling up in Eureka, which has been kind of, both a pain and something that it's like, it is something that I really want to get to the Baldesian Arsenal. It is like this, like, I did not take part in this content. I want to kind of get to that piece of content. But when I look at Zadnor, when I look at the lost actions, because we don't get lost actions later until the series of Eureka, so lost actions right at the start. When I start playing Heaven on High and Palace of the Dead, I want to see some of those lessons brought into this piece, right? Cool. One of the things about like Deliberum, one of the things about the raids and how they've got the Bozjan structure is like how I would love to see that influence brought into you as a player in terms of it's where in 14 it was used as leveling content, but then Bozja became the leveling content, right? And people were like, oh, that's going to kill one of the others if they decided to do both. I don't think it would. It just gives the players choice. The content's the content. And whether you want to level up in, the exploratory zone or in Heaven on High, like you still get to choose that for yourself. But what I'd love to see as a part of a new dungeon also is that, yeah, while leveling content, but I love the proofs of metal. I love the expanded leveling content. I love the ways that they could make it, like you said, very challenging, but something that as a player, you don't have to grind so you can go do the Savage raid on the weekend, because those systems are disconnected. I love and respect that so much. But within an eternal system, give me more experience. Give me a reason just to keep living and grinding in that system so I can try to push myself further and further, whether it's solo or whether it's with a group. And I think that's what I would love to see, the evolution of Deep Dungeon based off of the other lessons that Deep Dungeon taught them in other content.
Yeah. So I agree with 100% of that. I think the Valors were super, super cool. That was a very clever end to that. So to shift to the limited job side of this, and then we can kind of loop back around for all of it. The limited jobs were announced at FanFest and were kind of like an Apex Legends type thing, where they were announced and then just handed to us. Mm-hmm. Now it was a pretty quick turnaround from when we first heard what a Blue Mage was to when we went hands-on, compared to something like Reaper or Sage, where we hear about it for a year before we even know what it does. People are like, oh, Sage does a lot of damage. Based on what information? Like you saw a laser beam, and so like we were just guessing for a year, and that's fun. But like the Blue Mage was a really fast turnaround. Now, as a result of that first turnaround, Blue Mage was introduced as a new concept, and they said we've already scheduled out all the abilities through level 70, and then they only gave us level 50, and so our very first impressions were already limited impressions, because we weren't even seeing the system as it was designed at the time it was implemented. Mm-hmm. We were seeing a partial, as opposed to something like where you got to play the game at A Realm Reborn, and now that's partial because the game has moved on. It was partial from day one. And so a lot of people who didn't like Blue Mage have grown to like it, because now they're getting to see the completed thought as it was originally intended, which is really neat. And I look forward to seeing the future iteration of that. The limited job system frustrates a lot of people, especially people who identified with Blue Mage in particular, as opposed to if it'd been Onion Knight, just because like Blue Mage was the one, they're like, oh, it's the one job I wanted. Mm-hmm. As opposed to if they spun something new up, this is a Yoshi P Mage, where like there wasn't anybody who like, oh, I'd always wanted them to add a Yoshi P Mage. No, you just invented something out of thin air. And so that being a limited job, at least you're not taking nostalgia away from somebody.
Yeah.
But the limited job system not being a full job has frustrated a portion of the player population. And we are about to go through a stat squish. We're about to get rid of belts. Mm-hmm. We're about to have a finale and then a new story. We just brought a ton of new players in. We're trying data center visit at a time that we can barely keep our data centers up and not having queues. There is a lot of moving parts right now. And any of those moving parts, regardless of intent, are points where the community can have friction with the devs. Mm-hmm. They just added a mount that people didn't want to be paid, that they data mined it and thought it would be free, and then it turned out to be paid. That frustrated people. The Fat Black Chocobo campaign frustrated people. There's been plenty of times for these minor frustrations. The limited job system already being tried and true to frustrate some portion of the player population. I would not announce it at this live letter, because they're already going to have to spend 30 more minutes talking about the stat squish. So I would not introduce anything else that's on the realm of like gender locking.
Spend so much time on stat squish. It's like, oh, like it is what it is, right?
I wouldn't touch it.
It's not going to be anything that anybody should be overall worried about. So I hope that they don't spend too much time on stat squish. I think you're right when it comes to the limited. I think when you look at what would be a good 0.1, 0.3, or 0.5 piece of content, when there isn't essentially a raid to compete with it, or something like that, that ends up being the best time, because I want to see a Beastmaster, and I want to see a Puppet Master, and I want to see a Time Mage, and I want to see, like, honestly, at the end of the day, like, who knows what their plans are. Yoshi P saying that, like, at some point, maybe the number 14 doesn't make sense for this game.
Right.
Whatever that ends up meaning, but Yoshi P.
He just threw out another number, though. He's like, maybe we'll name it like 20.
20.
Doesn't that just kick that problem?
Final Fantasy 20, guys. Welcome. But essentially, like, when you think about it, like, what I really would love to see is how limited jobs play within the ecosystem, especially other limited jobs. So when I think about it, like, okay, we got a caster, as much as I'd love like a Time Mage, maybe they would put that as a healer limited job or something like that nature, where every role has a limited version that kind of plays and changes up the gameplay itself. But back to bringing this all back in circle, as much as I would love for them to be like, and guess what, guys, Beastmaster, like, it doesn't make sense to announce that pre-expansion. There's so much stuff to do, right? No one's going to be leveling up Beastmaster through the Endwalker story. I think that's a perfect time as we go into 6.1 or one of these other off patches. But I still would love to see them take what we do know with Blue Mage and allow it into more content, allow it into Eureka, allow it into the Deep Dungeon, where I would say is like, just draw a line. If you're running with a Blue Mage, then note that certain achievements are not available or different achievements are available.
Right.
So if
you can have Blue Ultimate, you can't have,
yeah,
and it's not going to drop shiny weapons.
Right. It's like, go ahead. Cool. You know, it is what it is, because like Blue can do so much, especially when you've got the skills and you're running with a whole group. And that's what I think what kind of turned the conversation of the limited job on its head was, at first it was like, this sucks. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I see, because they finished the thought, just absolutely how destructive this job is. And so that's where, like, I would love to see them let that job into more of the content that we don't currently have access to. And that's what I want to see. That's the blend. That's the kind of final thought for me.
I want a PvP mode that's just
Blue
jobs.
Just
limited jobs.
All limited.
We need more limited jobs to make that fun.
Yeah.
And each week there's different things available, right? So if there's a Beast Master, there's different beasts available. If there's a Blue Mage, there's different spells on the bar. So it's a rotating thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh God, this week there's some weird abilities. This is gonna be crazy. And so, like, I think it's also brilliant content to release second half. So announcing it at FanFest instead of at the last live letter before Endwalker, and then releasing it second half. Second half is when people are like, okay, I've tried all 10 systems that are released, and I only liked these 6. As opposed to releasing at the beginning, it's like, now there's an 11th system I have to try. So, like, a lot of us try things, and you're like, you fall off a particular relic grind, or you decide not to do Savage this expansion or this tier, or you don't end up going and farming for the extreme mounts or whatever. You don't get into Ishgard Restoration if we end up with a new restoration. And so give people a chance to try out the number of things we do know, the number of things that do belong at the beginning of an expansion, things like relics, because they need to progress, and put a limited job at the back end, something more timeless like this, where you could still go start Blue Mage for the first time in Endwalker, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And so I would go put that more timeless evergreen content later in an expansion, which is the same patches where we see things like UI updates, quality of life upgrades, long requested pieces of things that have required restructures. Those typically go more in the back half, once an expansion's had a chance to kind of settle in. So I would announce Deep Dungeon as a line item, and I would keep limited job to myself if we were getting both next expansion.
Yeah, maybe even have it like limited job updates, like something just like, hey, yeah, we haven't completely forgotten.
Which is at the least is 10 more levels of Blue Mage.
Yeah, exactly. It's like at the minimum. Oh yeah, that clearly means that Blue Mage is going to 80. All right, let's do that. And I think that wouldn't. What did they do that last time at the like 2.5 or 3? Like it wasn't like right after the expansion. It did take a patch or two.
At least a half patch late. It wasn't day one.
Right, exactly. And I don't think
maybe it was time to like the Poetic Scare became available. I literally don't remember.
Something. It's been 2 years. So
because the augmented Crippler will go up for Poetics, but not day one.
Yeah, not day one. All right, guys, that's good. Those are thoughts on especially Deep Dungeon on limited jobs. Our expectation for the live letter itself. Let us know what you're thinking. If you're wanting more Final Fantasy content in your feed today, be sure to hang out with us tonight. We're going to be live an hour before the event. I think it kicks off 9 p.m. Central. So we'll probably be live around 8 p.m. Central, hanging out, playing games, talking Final Fantasy. And then it's just going to be a lot of content this week. So no matter where you're subscribed to us, we thank you for being subscribed. And yeah, we appreciate you. Chris, why don't you lead us out?
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. We might see the sunrise Saturday morning. Some part of me hopes not, but if we do, maybe that's because we got so much content. So it's a great time to be playing Final Fantasy XIV. Lots of big events and news coming your way, and we will, of course, be here along the way. This is an exciting time of year for everybody involved with 14. Let us know what you're most excited about, and we will see you next time.
Take care.